Hello and welcome to the Christian Therapist Podcast. Lindsay Castleman here, and of course, I am joined by my friend and fellow therapist, Aron Strong.
Hey, Lindsay.
Hello, sir. We're back. Now, this
We
time, Aron, is part two of really and truly, it's when your spouse is mean to your kids. And
right?
so we did part one, and I feel like it would be good for us just to confess that we did part one quite a long time ago. Usually we do them pretty back to back, so it's just
Yep.
continual. But we
Right.
have lived some life in between
It's true.
the last one and this one, and we had our marriage intensive and had so many couples, and it was just a sweet time.
Hmm.
And also, I would say a sweet time, but also, it's just there's just a lot of pain, a lot of honesty, a lot of vulnerability that happens. And so, it's a privilege to be able to walk with those couples through it. But then we also had an event that we got to help, host with CEs for therapists as well. Our annual event that we partner with Fellowship Bible Church in. And man, that was crazy. We sold out with that, which we're very thankful. About to launch the member group for therapists. And I'll tell you, it feels like, Aaron, because we now can offer CEs for things. I mean, I know you just launched all of our online courses with
Right.
CEs.
Yep.
It just feels so cool, like just this freedom to be able to offer so much more to
Hmm.
therapists that will also give them credit for their
Right.
boards.
Yeah. Absolutely. The
And
the,
so,
uh, the the
yeah,
all the stuff that we've done, especially all the content that we've taught and written over the years with the member group, to be able to offer that kind of a large scale, people who've
yeah,
forgotten what those things were, from years ago or want to
sure.
revisit that. Being able to not just leverage what we have, but then add that benefit
Mhm.
of CEs, kind
Right.
of really just fits the niche that we like to be in, and just helping therapists really kind of find the strategies that fill the holes that they have a hard time finding other places.
Yes.
So,
Well, and I know that you worked super, super hard on making sure that people who watch our online courses will be able to pretty immediately after get their
yeah,
CEs just by taking a survey, and then they'll
right.
get it right to them, which is awesome. But remind me, I know that you added like working with vulnerability, I think working with people you don't like
Yeah,
as
that's on there.
well. We already had the theology of emotions, and I think we already had attachment theory and faith, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, we got like working with betrayal and working in vulnerability. We got
Mhm.
dissociation, disorganized attachment, narcissists, fail-proofing enactments. Couples work with an individual,
Good Lord, man.
fail.
You were hard at work, Aaron. You were hard at work getting all of those up and launched. So I just appreciate it, and just thankful. It just feels like we have such a bigger runway now that we're able to
Mhm.
provide CEs. So that's super
Right.
cool. Anyway, so all that to say, Aaron, we have lived some life and we have done some things
That's
in
right.
in between, just really to help grow and to equip therapists and couples and just people,
That's right.
which
That's
which
right.
I'm glad for. But to get us both back up to speed, the last episode that we talked about, I actually read it was someone that wrote in on this Facebook group that I will sometimes just like sneak on and look because sometimes I cringe at their advice. Anyways, but the gist of it was really that her husband was got really angry, got really upset. It was either like the 2-year-old or 4-year-old toddler, and so last time we talked a little bit more about as a mother, like
Hmm.
how should she stand in the gap to protect her kiddo? Because that is a big part of our job is we are supposed to, as parents, it's what we take on. We take on that we are going to protect our kiddo, even if it's from ourself, even if it's from our spouse. Like we
Yeah.
move in
Hmm.
because we've had so many clients that have shown up that have said, man, I wish my mom, I wish my dad would have stood in the gap for me so that I wouldn't have had to take all this on as a kid. You know,
Right.
I wish I had a protector. I wish I had someone that I could, like, I keep going, that I could like find shelter in, because it can get very scary, especially when someone who is two, three, four times your size is coming at you in anger. That can get really, really scary. But we also wanted to give the other perspective, because when we get into the room with clients, we do want to kind of help advocate for the ways they need to step in to protect, but we also don't want to turn someone into a villain.
Right.
We
That's
also want to be able to start to slow down and wonder what could be happening in this person because they were also a little kid at one
that's
time,
right. Hmm.
and help them see what could be happening so that you can then, like, if this mom, this wife was our client, we could help her know now how to go navigate and really try to find out what's happening within her husband, right? And
Right.
again, all of this is if there is safety involved,
Hmm.
because
For
we
sure.
don't want to keep returning people into something where they're going to get abused or hurt in that
Yeah,
way.
we're not looking to for people to be destroyed in a process of trying to hold accountability or offer care, right? We shouldn't
Hmm.
diminish ourselves, but when we have enough of ourselves to step in, and then we can go have room to go be curious about what happens. Like the
Yeah.
big framework that we always talk about is it's compassion for why and accountability for what, and they have to go together. And when we don't like what someone does, we throw compassion out the window and say, that's terrible. Accountability, right? And then
Hmm.
that person may already feel bad, or if they get flooded, they get overwhelmed. They're not trying to do bad. Like it just happened. Now they're just condemned. They're shamed, anyway, we'll talk about all the exacerbates all the things.
Yeah.
So, in that space, then when we look at the compassion, as we look at compassion, it's not to say that we're forsaking accountability,
Hmm.
right? Because that's what the first part was about. But this part of like what happens in us, no one wakes up and says, you know what, I think I'll just scream at my kid today. You know what I mean?
We hope not.
Right? That's
Yeah,
not usually what happens. And truth be told, all of us at some point get exasperated and probably yell at our kids, right? Because it's just
sure.
like, stop, because they're not listening or you're scared or whatever. So understanding what happens inside of us or the spouse, right? The husband in the scenario, the question we talked about, what happens in us that we do get that overwhelmed? We do kind of lose our own agency and tolerance for distress, and it just pours out of us or it gets directed towards a child. Kind
Hmm.
of what happens, Lindsay? Why they do that?
I know, I know. And I think it's important to name because this is, I don't know, Aaron, if you coined it, but what we call it is we start to build a model of the other, right? And
Hmm.
so I think you even named it in one of our online courses that we have, just to really kind of stretch out what this can look like in more detail. But there is a place where even for us as clinicians, we have to sit back and almost embody within us, like what can be happening inside that could produce such a behavior, you
Right.
know? And
Yep.
so, and we can take guesses too, but as to where that came from within their story.
Yeah.
But that's usually what I will start out asking the client is I will ask them, how does this anger at the toddler make sense in context of their story?
Right.
Like how would that make sense based on all you know about your
Hmm.
spouse, right? So that it starts to help us look big picture. And
Yep.
sometimes clients will sit back and go, "Oh, well, they had a dad that got mad all the time on a hair trigger," right? And so that's great because that starts to give us this information,
Right.
information that might say, oh my gosh, this is the neural pathway that they know, right? And we
Hmm.
say it all the time. You don't always do what you want to do, you do what you know.
Yep.
So it's just a natural pathway coming out. They might could say, well, based on what we know, they have had a really, really rough time at work. I mean, that you just start to get them to imagine
Yeah.
with you, like based on everything that you know, how can this behavior start to make sense, right? Because what we know is that something is happening inside of their spouse internally that feels so intolerable that they cannot keep it in. They can't lead it
Right.
well. They
Yeah.
can't maintain it. It has to come out and it has to come out sideways.
And it's really complicated too. In kind of neuroscience, James Ledoux talks about how there's two roads of our emotions. There's a high road that goes
Hmm.
through our prefrontal cortex where we're aware of it and we can think of it and we can try to manage it. Then there's this low road that skips the prefrontal cortex. It's precortical. And
Yeah.
so I don't even know that that's happening. That feeling is in me, but we know that that low road emotion that's present in the body, unaware to the mind, or to our sense of self influences behavior and thought patterns.
Hmm.
And then he also talks about emotions as a part of memory process, right? So they're
Hmm.
just linked together, these memories and these feelings, but they can happen under the water.
Right.
And so, for example, you said, he had a dad who had a hair trigger, and then he was never allowed to cry out loud because dad would reply. Then hearing a child that can just feel the freedom to cry rubs right up against that sensation that's not allowed.
Correct.
Right? You're not allowed to cry out
Right.
because you can't, and he
Right.
couldn't. And his need to cry didn't ever come out as a cry. He got older, and then it usually probably came out as anger or somewhere where he could kind of stand up for himself, right? So then that
Yeah.
hurt feeling, that rejected hurt feeling, comes out in this new way as he's older. But then he gets a child, right, around the age maybe when that started really experiencing that happening. And then this child is doing something that is fundamentally outside of their experience. And we're not thinking about all of that, but at the same time, experiencing the intensity of that cry produces an immediate felt response that is incongruent, even with how we see ourselves.
Hmm.
And we don't even know why we respond that way. And yet, all of that stuff can be elicited. It can just show up in a moment. And then someone yells at you for yelling. And then you're just like, well, crap, now I'm just like my dad. And then it all continues to crumble, right?
Right, right. And that is what happens when we're not aware of what's happening on the high road or the low road,
Right.
is that we often do repeat and create the same feeling in our kiddos that was created within us,
Hmm.
which is a horrible thing. It reminds you a little bit of like the sins of the father, like just things that get passed down unless we
Yep.
do our own work to catch them and
Yep.
to notice them. And even when we were sitting at Kurt Thompson's workshop last week or whenever it was, time has flown. He even talked about he had a client that would get upset at his either 2 or 4 year old, and
Hmm.
when Kurt started to slow it down and walk back with him, this person actually had a sibling that died at age 2. And as a kiddo, he tried to save that sibling, but the sibling didn't listen to him and then died. And so then when his 2 year old's not listening to him, everything inside of him feels like it's life or death,
Right.
right? Because it was back then. And so
Hmm.
there is a place of slowing down and doing that work of separating that out. What was
Yep.
happening then isn't happening now,
Yep.
which can be very, very difficult.
It's also very difficult when you're the spouse of the angry person.
Sure.
And their anger then triggers something in you about how they're treating your child. So now this protective feeling comes up, and
Mm-hmm.
then we kind of do the same things that the other person's doing. They're screaming at the kid, and we're screaming at them. You can't yell at that, right?
Oh,
Because we're
yeah.
all so dysregulated and overwhelmed. And that ability to manage ourselves, to catch and be aware, sometimes we're not even aware of a tone or a phrase or a behavior until we kind of witness ourselves doing it.
Hmm.
I know with my wife sometimes I'll hear how something comes out of my mouth and I'm like,
Hmm.
"Oh, let me like pull that back." That because I'll just say like, "And I don't know why that sounded so mean. Like I didn't
Right.
think I meant it mean, right? But I
Yeah.
heard it, right? Is
Sure.
you know that awareness where we can catch that alerts us that there's something going on underneath that we're not attuned to.
Right.
And that happens in everyone, right? It can happen to us when we're super judgmental. It can happen to
Mhm.
us when we're like, well, I guess judgmental works both sides here. Wife's judgmental to
Mhm.
husband, husband's judgmental to the child. But how do we
Sure.
get into there to say kind of what's happening? I often t tease it out with clients that like they ask the wrong question with the wrong feeling, right? Because
Mm.
they'll be like, "What is wrong with you?" Right?
Right.
Instead of what's wrong? What's
Hmm.
happening?
Hmm.
Right? And that question of curiosity is one that can lead to co-discovery because sometimes when we don't know, having someone with us that
Right.
can attune to our feelings with us, we can try to find language together, that
Hmm.
collaborative process that we do as therapists all the
Hmm.
time, but really we're designed to need in every relationship, really.
Hmm.
That helps us discover more of ourselves in that safe environment. And anytime we're flooded in emotion, there's almost always a sense of detachment or disconnect in relationship
Sure.
because, being that alone is intolerable. We can't. What was the phrase? I tried to use it with a client the other day. It's like connection is something, or suffering is something, and suffering alone is intolerable. But I couldn't remember the other.
Suffering is inevitable, but suffering is
Inevitable, right? I couldn't remember.
intolerable.
So
Yes.
that sense of, I was like, suffering is something, but
Right.
suffering alone is
It's not
intolerable.
good. Suffering's
That's
not good.
what I
Yeah.
was. Anyway, but that sense of if we can do this together, then we can kind of keep ourselves regulated with one another, and then we can go discover what's really happening here.
For sure. And it does feel like having the posture, and this is a hard posture to take, for a posture that would be open to feedback, like
Hmm.
a posture that would be open to going, you could be right. Like I don't feel it right now. I wasn't connected to that, but you could be right. And then
Yeah.
you do the work of slowing it down because I will tell you, I mean, even my kiddo now will say like, you said that in a mean tone, and I'm like,
Did I?
and having to go back and be like, I did. I did. I
Hmm.
would, the frustration was there,
Yeah.
like to own it and to kind
Yeah.
of tuck my tail between my legs and to be
Yeah.
like, you're right. Like it was there. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, oh, I know it was there, Um,
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
well aware of it and I'm speaking for it, because that frustrated me, you
That's
know.
right. And I think
Um,
that high road and low road is also important to know that people have expressions of emotion. Sometimes they don't know they're having because it's low road. But I
mhm.
can take ownership that I had it. But our biggest concern is that someone thinks I am that low road feeling that I didn't notice. I am
Sure.
someone who just yells at my kid. I am someone who can behave in this way. And
Hmm.
so we defend or we deny that action to protect our sense of self, which is kind of the role of the amygdala, is to protect our sense of self. We protect our sense of self, but we then abandon the feeling that acted out or dismiss it. When really, if I know someone knows who I am, and then
Hmm.
that's safe, then it's easier to say, I don't know why that feeling's in me and I can confess that if I'm not condemned for having
Hmm.
it. Then we can just
Yeah.
be curious to say, well, then what happened? Because I think we often think people try to have a feeling or they choose their feelings and they
Hmm.
don't. They just show up, right? They're just
Yeah.
there. You got to
Yeah.
figure out what to do with it.
Yeah. Well, and going back to, the question at hand, which really is, if we've got the wife in the room and we're helping her kind of understand what could be happening underneath
Hmm.
for the husband, based on everything that she knows about who he is, his growing up. And there's still going to be some stuff we don't know because we're not going to fully know why that feeling shows up sideways until we do the work ourselves of slowing it down and connecting with it and seeing what it holds.
That's right.
That's when we start to see, because it's the same thing with that guy who got upset at his kiddo until he slowed down and started to sit with the anger, and the anger produced the memory of his 2-year-old sibling dying.
Right.
He had no idea that's even what it held. And
Hmm.
we can, as therapists, we can do all the pontificating, all the
Yeah,
wondering that we can, but it's when we slow down and we start to do that searching and knowing within us is when we start to go, oh, that's what's there. That's really
yeah,
what's there. And
yeah.
so as a spouse, we get to try our best that we can, the best that our spouse will allow us to saddle up next to them and
Hmm.
wonder with them.
That's right. And that's part of, I think, our role as therapists is not to turn people into therapists, but
Right.
there's some universal principles we leverage in therapy we want
Sure.
people to have, right?
Mhm.
And that sense of, from a theological perspective, seek me and know me and show me all the wayward ways of my heart, like help.
Right.
And that sense of like, you know me so I can know me better, right? Is
Yes.
what we do in therapy is I go seek to know my client and
Hmm.
embody their felt experience so I can assess what happens in that environment and then collaborate to together feeling that they're feeling together, find language and explore memories in that safe environment. And then when times when we have just the wife in the room and the husband's not, then
Hmm.
we help her know here's how you go be curious. Here's how you go embody his feeling, be with him, create that safe environment the way you and I are doing. You can then
Hmm.
go do that together,
Right.
and then you can collaborate in that environment. Uh, in ASR, we call that move four, right? Because that's what we're
Hmm.
doing. Like, here's what we do in ourself, and here's what we do between us. Here's how you go connect with another who's not in the room of therapy to really teach someone how to be with them in distress to
Hmm.
uncover these underlying principles. And then there's this particular bonding that happens. It's very
Right.
specific that we experience with clients where they would just like trust us so fully. We want that to happen, especially in marriage relationships, but in
Hmm.
other relationships too, where that's appropriate and within the dynamics of the relationship.
Right. And some of that wording can even be, I care for you, and I know that that's not truly how you want your relationship to be with your kiddo.
Right. That's right.
Like I know you. I know that's not what you want,
Hmm.
but I want to look at this with you,
Yeah, it's
right?
honoring the other feelings we also know are present,
Yes.
right? How could you yell at your kid as though that's the only feeling that is present? But we also know he loves us, like we're assuming,
Hmm.
right? But most parents, they love their kid, they want to
Hmm.
protect their kid. In that moment, those feelings aren't online,
Right.
but they're true. Even if they're not
Hmm.
active, they're true.
Hmm.
We
Yes.
want to build a model of someone that contains all those truths, the things that hold distress, the things that are protective and loving, and
Hmm.
not binary things out into good or bad, or
Right.
you're just a bad person because you did a bad thing, but understanding the totality of someone. How do we
Hmm.
work in those environments to really help them integrate within themselves so that they're more of a whole person in all moments? When I
Yes.
feel that distress, I remember the other feelings that may not be online, or I can go get them and pull them present so that I can work that out in myself or even confess it to my spouse. I'm really activated right now. Can you step in for a minute?
Hmm.
And that sense of coordination
Hmm.
is not just good for the marriage, it's a great model for their children
Oh, yes.
of what you want them to do when they grow up.
Right, right. And, moving in this way of coming alongside your spouse is that compassion piece when we're talking about compassion and accountability. More of part one that we talked about was more of the accountability piece. But there's
Right.
still, and just for everybody to know, there still needs to be a space for both. I'm
Right.
going to come alongside of you. I want to be curious about this. I know this isn't you. Let's look at what's happening.
Hmm.
And when this anger, when these feelings are showing up and it doesn't feel like you're captaining the ship here, I'm going to have to step in and captain the ship, you
Hmm.
know? And I'm doing
Yeah.
this because I know that this isn't what you want,
Yeah.
you know?
And theologically, that's kind of how God does things, right? He leads in compassion, but if you reject compassion, then all you're left with is judgment.
Hmm.
Accountability holds both, right? Out of compassion, accountability is trying to restore relationship. There's something that's
Hmm.
broken the relationship. Let's get that out of the way so we can be together again.
Right.
But when you reject God's compassion, then you're just left with judgment and consequence. And in
Hmm.
marriage or in any kind of relationship, that's the same sort of thing where we show up with compassion, we show up with compassion, we offer grace, we're trying to connect, we're trying to coordinate between, beneath. and then that's rejected over and over and over again, then at some point we're like, okay, well, then I believe you and I'm done and I'm not
Hmm.
going to do that anymore. Now I will just do these things because
Hmm.
you can't participate in it together. So then I will make choices and do it
Right.
this way.
Right.
And we do that because we're made in God's image. That's how God does things. He's kind of better at it than we are.
Sure. Sure.
But that's the
Sure.
goal. The goal is we can draw lines, but really we try to do this path of relationship first.
Hmm.
But there's a time when, we got to step in and just protect things.
Yeah, because all lines, all boundaries, and this is what I tell my clients, all boundaries should lead back to restoring relationship.
Right.
And I think I told you, I can't remember, like I've had such a wrestle with forgiveness and just what does forgiveness look like, and even just that place of really trying to slow down where it's like it's the verse of like, if someone takes your cloak, give him another one. If he takes
Right.
your purse, give him your other purse. All this stuff. And, it's hard because you do sit back and go, well, man, it feels like, is Jesus asking people to be doormats here?
Right.
But as you start to explore it, and honestly, as I get Tim Keller to help me decipher it, there was a place where he's going, no, what you do is it's not saying just take all my crap. It's saying, hey, you took the cloak, not in a great way. I'm going to give you a chance to do it again in a way that restores relationship.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to give you another chance to do this in a way that you can see me and you can hopefully come back and return back to relationship. And I was
Hmm.
like, that feels so much better to me. That feels more like the heart of God. That's like, okay, you came and hurt me. I'm going to draw this boundary. I'm going to also give you this opportunity to come return back. Let's do this again. Let's do this again differently
That's right.
in this other way. And I'm going to keep giving you chances to do it differently. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that I have to trust you. It doesn't
Right.
mean that I have to be reconciled to you.
Yeah.
But it does mean like I'm going to keep giving you those opportunities to come back into right relationship.
Yeah.
And that's what he does for us.
There's a progression where the hope is that forgiveness leads someone to repentance.
Correct.
Right? I forgive you. You receive that forgiveness, and that brokenness and that transfer leads to a sense of repentance.
Hmm.
Repentance then leads to reconciliation, where the relationship can be restored. And in
Hmm.
the process of reconciliation, restoration
Hmm.
really can occur where that we're back to whole, right?
Yes. Yes.
And oftentimes we think forgiveness means restoration.
Right.
And like, no, there's like all of these things in between, these
Correct.
steps that, we can forgive someone, but if they don't receive it, then
Hmm.
it's for us. It's not, they won't, doesn't do anything in the relationship.
Yes.
Uh, but the hope is that forgiveness leads to repentance, repentance then to reconciliation, reconciliation to restoration, and that being an arc,
Hmm.
and then things can fall apart along the way, or we fight towards those things
For sure.
within
For
the
sure.
capacity of what's
Yeah.
present.
Because those boundaries are always to be set in love and to always be given a path back to relationship,
Right.
you
That's
know?
right.
And so that's the place of, as we see, if this wife was our client, we would just start to see what kind of boundaries would need to be set in love as she tries to come and saddle up next to her husband to wonder what's going on with him.
Mhm.
Is there an openness that he's got? Is he then pushing her away and saying everything's wrong with you? Like these are the places where we start to take in that information and we go, oh, okay. And start to wonder again, what's the feeling that's pushing her away? What is that that's actually bringing her close? And then we
Mhm.
start to look at what are the healthy boundaries to set in that way that will still invite him into relationship,
Yep.
you
And
know?
she could run into the same thing where if she had an angry parent that repair was never possible, she could be like, there's no point in talking, it's hopeless, because not because it is hopeless in the current situation, but she grew up that way also. So
Hmm.
those implicit elements play into all of the ways that we show up, right? Those models that we build over our life all show up kind of in our relationship together. So the more we can be willing to explore ourselves in
Mhm.
what we're feeling in ourselves, the more willing we're able to do that for someone else or with someone else, then that collaboration where we really are intending to connect, to be with one another, to recognize and take accountability for myself, but also offer that to another from both sides, where he's like, it'd be easier for me to know why I yell if you weren't screaming at me when I was screaming. Like, or we could talk about it later. Those elements where we're working it out together. That's really the key message here.
Yes, yes. Well, and hopefully, if we're able to listen to both part one and part two together, this will all make so much more sense and
Right.
feel more like a total package.
Yeah, for sure.
Just in how as clinicians we're going to sit with the wife in this scenario.
Yep. Yep.
Well, Aaron, I know next time we are going to have Mike Vaughn come in and talk about addiction in the brain, which
Yeah,
is
I'm really
cool.
looking forward to that. It's
And
gonna be
secretly, I'm saying that because we've already recorded it.
good. It's gonna be really
So we
good for
did it out
them.
of
It
order,
was
but
really good.
we'll put the podcast episodes in order.
That's right.
Anyways, it's a great conversation. We enjoy them. So hopefully, everybody enjoys the conversation as much as we did too.
Yeah. Good,
But yeah,
look,
good to see
good
you.
look forward to it. All right. We'll see you, Lindsay.